buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, pillow talk buffet. So, we are back for another wonderful episode of Pillow Talk Buffet. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Clara.
And we're so happy to have you guys here with us today.
We have a very important thing to talk about, but before we get there, how's your week been?
My week was pretty good. I had a birthday. I turned the 36.
How's it felt?
You know, I feel like it feels like a restart. There's something about knowing you only have about 40 years left of life left. It makes you say, you know what? I better kick it into high gear. So
I wonder if I can't wait to see this, like, especially like closer to my birthday, like in October, to be like, do I feel like that at 36 too?
Honestly, I'm a child. I'm a child, and who let me turn 36?
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that I'll be 40 in 4 years feels like wild. I remember being a kid and looking at people like, oh my God, they're so cool, they're grown. It's not that cool here.
I know. Inside of me, I feel much younger than like how old I have to say I am. And I know I told you about this recently, but something that really threw me is like when I went to my regular like laser hair removal appointment. I don't know what she's called, like the technician or whatever, the lady that was doing this service, we were talking, and we had talked before. She's a widow and she's 52, and she was telling me about how her online dating life has been going. And so I'm very curious because I've never done that. I know I've like said that before, and I know someday we'll talk about it and get people's stories, but I was like, tell me everything. What apps do you... I had so many questions, you know? And so she was telling me this time that she met someone that she really liked, and she was like, you know, he planned the date. He told me what time. He picked like this really cool place downtown. She's like, I have a new outfit. She was really excited. So she's like, you know, closer, like in between me and my mom's age. You know, like her daughter's like a little bit younger than me. And so she was like, the only thing that I'm like not sure about is that he is 10 years younger than me. He's 42.
Girl, get out our dating pool.
That's what I'm saying. I was so thrown. I was like, this lady is older than me by a bit. I don't want to say a ton, but like a bit. To like, I wouldn't date somebody necessarily her age, but the person that she's dating is not that much older than me. So it was just, I was like, we are in the same dating pool. That really threw me.
Back
so
up, sis.
I know. So like, that didn't feel great about my age. That didn't feel great at the time. But anyway, so I had to share that.
That's so weird. We're only 12 years younger than a 50-year-old. Oh no, more, 14. That's still a lot. Anyway, how was your week? This is getting bad.
It was fine. Nothing too exciting, except for I tried crumble cookies for the first time. Have you been there?
Oh my living God. Those cookies are the best cookies
I've
in the
heard.
entire world.
So I had never
God
tried
spits
them.
in those cookies.
God spits in them. You're not the only person that told me. Like, my friend Jennifer, my friend Liz, they were like, they change them every week. You have to go. And I was like, I don't want to go to just a cookie store. But I decided to go without my kids for the first time. I was like, I'm going to go check this out and see, you know. I bought a 4-pack of cookies. So I got like a coconut one, chocolate chip, salted caramel, and white chocolate macadamia nut. I didn't know how big they were. So when they gave me the box and they're like this big.
They're huge, yeah.
I was like, how am I going to eat all this? I ate all 4 of them within 24 hours because I didn't want to share with my kids. And I like warmed them up in the microwave every time. That's
You're
my amazing moment this week.
You're like sitting on your roof.
In a closet. I'm in my attic with the cat, just eating cookies off a
I
paper
just picture
plate.
you crouched down like a little gremlin.
Like, with both hands like this.
I'll be there in a minute.
I said go hide.
Yeah, crumble cookie is really good. My favorite is, you didn't ask for my favorite, but I'm going to tell you.
I want to know. Because I want to go every week now to see all the different ones.
There's a sugar cookie with like a lemon custard situation in the middle.
Oh.
Magnifique. Ugh, gives me an accent. And the chocolate chip is always good. And I had the sugar cookie with the pink icing. It takes me longer. I have to cut it up in little, you know, to get through them. But
yeah, that's probably better for you too.
I don't judge you at all. I don't.
No, I mean, my friend told me that she does the same thing. She cuts them up in like fours or whatever, so that she doesn't feel. And I was like, I just went for it. I did eat them all in like separate. You know, like I had a little bit. Like
I don't care if you said
still in a day.
I crumbs all over.
I wanted to though.
Was sitting in pure delight.
I wanted.
We only have about 40 to 50 years left. Eat your crumble cookies.
Eat your crumble cookies.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was a good week. I realized this week that there was one day where I just was like, I don't feel motivated to do anything. I don't want to, and I just felt like it was that day where it was kind of like humid and like overcast outside, and I kind of had a headache, and I was just like not like really feeling it that day. Like I was just like dragging and like tired, and but then the next day after that, and I you know, like wrote things down to remind myself, but the next day I felt like a completely different person, like motivated. I worked the entire day, like I got so much stuff done, like things that I had put in the back of my brain that like, oh, you really should do this tomorrow. And I just like kept putting it off, like, nah, forget this. I was dumb. I don't want to. And then I got it done. And it was like a good reminder that like, even though you might feel like, oh, like I'm not doing a good job or something one day, like you could, you know, like I completely flipped it the next day. And I had like called my friend Ariel, and we had talked about how we weren't motivated the day before, and she said the same thing. She was like, you know, maybe we're not supposed to feel productive our entire work day. Maybe it like is some balance. Like some days you feel into it and others you don't. Like, why do we think that we have to be like a workhorse like all hours of your work day?
I like that. Like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So anyways, so today, we are talking about mental health and going into our own personal journeys in hopes to, I guess, I've always been pretty open, and I've like learned a lot. I still have a lot more learning to do, but I always have tried to be open about anxiety and depression, and thankfully I've had good role models in my life that were also very open about it. And you know, just so that, you know, maybe other people don't feel alone if they have on different things that they've felt or are experiencing, and to kind of talk through, you know, our own journeys.
Yeah. I being raised in like a black household, and I probably said this a few episodes ago, maybe, I don't know, I don't remember what I said, but mental health, obviously, I think in our time growing up, I don't know, mental health wasn't a huge deal. We're considered millennials. I don't feel like I'm a millennial, but that's what they say. So it wasn't a huge conversation at a point. I don't recall it being so. And then especially in a black household, you don't talk about mental health, right? Like in a black Christian household. So you go pray. So I remember I was pretty close to this girl that I was going to church with at the time, and we were going to a mostly Caucasian or white church or whatever, and she was talking about her issues with anxiety and how she was on medication. That was the first time I had heard, and it was like jarring, because I'm like, oh my God, like, you know Jesus and you're on medication. Like, it was like, it didn't make sense in my mind just because of my like limited understanding, that like my limited understanding.
How old were you?
I was 17.
Okay.
And
so that's like your first memory that you have of like kind of realizing mental health and kind of making that connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as she was explaining some of the things that she was experiencing with anxiety, I was like, do I have anxiety? Like there were things that made sense to me. And so I remember going to my mom, and she was in the kitchen cooking. And I said, Mom, I was going out on a limb. And I was like, Mom, I think I struggle with anxiety. She looked at me, and she looked back at the pot and didn't say a word. And I was like, all right, maybe I don't.
Just kidding.
Back
to Jesus.
Right.
Back to Jesus. So that's why. So just kind of like to like match like where you're at, I guess. I had a very different experience with mental health because I was aware of it my entire life. Even though in like our time frame of the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't as talked about, or I guess there wasn't an awareness the way I think that there is now, and I think we still have like a lot like farther to go to get to where it's not, you know, something that people are so ashamed of. And I think that the mental health system has a lot of room to grow, I would say, like, and it needs a lot of improvements. And I think that like the way our whole, I'm gonna try not to go off the deep end here, but the way our whole society is structured, there's so many things where
I'm sorry, keep talking.
there's so many things like the way our country and society are set up that we don't put enough resources into mental health, in my opinion. Like even when you talk about like police, I think that a lot of things are more punishable when they could be treatable. Okay, so just in general, I think we have a long way to go, but I think we've also come a long way.
I do too.
So back to, I have to give my mom a lot of credit for me knowing about mental health, because it was a big deal when she went on antidepressants in the 80s. I was only I was basically an infant or a toddler, and you know, she says that she was afraid she was going to hurt me. And so she went to the doctor, and, you know, they talked about anxiety and depression. I think it was more depression then. I think anxiety kind of came a little later, just as far as understanding and awareness. But she was afraid she was going to hurt me. And then when her and my dad lived together, my dad said that my mom would take her meds for a little bit and then think she was better, go off of them, and then become terrifying. And she did that for a while, and I remember some of the times that she did that, and it was very scary. Like, she just was angry, you know, like just angry and like bad temper and like throwing things and breaking things. And you know, my dad, you know, says that he kind of gave her like an ultimatum, like, you stay on them or like we're going, because this is not safe, you know, for us. So they both kind of like tell it a little differently, but the gist of it is my mom has stayed on her medication for a really long time, and she's always been very open with me about depression and how it runs in our family, and to kind of be aware of it. And even though, and you know, especially with her side of the family, it's like either somebody is on antidepressants or not dealing with their anxiety and depression, or we've had like a lot of substance abuse on my mom's side. So people kind of, and I've lost 2 cousins that were in their 20s from overdoses. So, you know, I think that it's like very widely an issue on my mom's side of the family, and I think that, you know, people became more aware of it as like things were happening. So with me, she was really open about it. But even so, when I, like, you know, certain things would happen to me, and I would be like, I think that this is not normal to feel this way. I was just like, but I'm really passionate. I'm an intense personality. Like, that's how I am. Like, and even though my mom needed it, I don't need it. I don't need it. I'm fine, you know?
That's interesting because, again, it was like Jesus, like, you know, you go pray about it or something like that. And when I started to look back, as I've, you know, just kind of been aware of my own personal mental health the last like few years, that those feelings were associated with like guilt or shame, like I was sinning too much or doing the wrong thing, and that's why I feel how I feel. So it was like this vicious cycle that I didn't really understand. I have not been like diagnosed with, recently, the therapist I'm saying, she did tell me like, you do deal with like moderate to severe anxiety. I haven't been officially like diagnosed with depression. And I'm on the fence about where I am with it, right? Like, like, am I, what is it called when you're like diagnosed with depression? Like, do I have depression? Like, is it something I'll have forever? Or is this connected to like some unresolved trauma? And once I resolve the trauma, I'll have, like, I don't know. And I'm not being dismissive to anyone's journey. Like, I don't know. I'm still like getting comfortable with the idea that this is a thing. And I don't know how I feel about it being like long term or like situational or circumstantial.
Sure.
But being able to realize like, oh, this isn't connected to, this isn't like a issue internally. Like, this isn't connected to my activities or behavior. Like, this is a result of something else. But if I was feeling low, like, I prayed today, what's wrong with me? You know, or I did this today. Why do I feel sad? I felt like it was like condemnation, like guilt. And so it just was a vicious cycle for a long time until most recently I was able to say, oh, and it was by way of hearing another interview. I was to a different podcast, and there was a Christian rapper, and he was saying he would go through the same cycles. Like, he would feel guilty, and he was dealing with depression, and then there was a vice he had, and it was just a vicious cycle. And until he gained like understanding and started to go to therapy and he was on medication for a period, not a long time, he was able to separate the two. So being able to divide like my whatever's going on in my brain or whatever's going on, like, I still don't understand it all for myself yet. I do understand it's a chemical imbalance or whatever. It's not associated with like who I am.
I can definitely relate to the part where it feels like a cycle. And when I was realizing, more recently, I think it was like in April, that I was feeling worse than usual, because I think I've always been an anxious person. I was managing it. And like the way I always explain like how anxiety feels to me is just like an electricity under your skin where it just feels like you can't sit still and you just like want to squeeze it out of you. And I know that sounds wild, but that's how it feels for me. Like, I'm a jittery person. I move a lot. So I was telling Liz about it, like, love you, Liz. I was like, it was before my appointment. I was like, I'm really nervous. I was like, I've almost gone on medication before, because I had, after I had Autumn, my second kid, I had postpartum, and they really wanted to put me on medication then, because at that point I was like crying in the doctor's office. And it's hard when they ask you all the screening questions, because they were like, do you feel like you're a failure to your family or yourself? And I was like, I absolutely feel like I'm a failure to my family, and I just can't. I want to do so well by them, and I just can't do enough to feel like I'm good enough for them, like to deserve them. And so they prescribed me medication. I picked it up, and then I just never took it. I was like, this will go away. Once Autumn's bigger, and, this will go away. And it was always like that. It was always, so anyways, when I was talking to Liz, she said, well, think about your life. Like, you have gone through some shit, and it's the same for you. Like, you've gone through some shit. So for me, I was always thinking like, after this big obstacle, I'll feel better. And then I would for a bit. And then I'd be like, well, like, after this stressful thing is over, I'll feel better, And then for me, when it got to the point where, I had been seeing my same therapist for like 2.5 years, and, she helped me through my divorce. She helped me to, figure a lot of stuff out. She really went on a journey with me, especially through COVID. She said, I think that you are more depressed and anxious than usual, and it's not connected to anything. Your divorce is done. You got all these things taken care of that you always thought is what you were anxious about and worried about. And I was sitting there crying like the guy that mows my lawn broke his wrist, I had to do it myself, like crying straight up. And she was like, I am just wondering if you've thought about looking into medication, because I think that this is different for you. This is like a bit more intense for you. So for me, that was like, okay, let me see for a few days, and I would still go back and forth, but just got to the point where I was like, I don't want to feel worried all the time, or like I should be doing something else or something more, or like you're literally on fire or being electrocuted and like moving and jittery, and then for me, I try to use all these vices, like drinking, watching TV, overeating, you know, like smoking, like all these things to fill, like, and I was just like, I don't want to keep doing that either.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's something you said that reminded me of when it started to get to a point. So probably the last, I will probably say what threw me over the edge, potentially. I don't know, because some things I can't go back and trace completely.
Sure.
But probably when my mom passed was probably threw me over the edge. Probably. Likely. But there are certain things that didn't start manifesting physically, like anxiety attacks or panic attacks, or I don't know if they were anxiety or panic. I've looked them up. I just know I would cry like uncontrollably and have a hard time like catching my breath. So when they start to manifest like that, and then you don't know if you look it up, like there are other ways that things manifest. So I would feel guilty for being a bad friend because I'll become recluse. And I'm introverted already, like in a way, you know what I mean? Like, I like my time by myself, you know. But I would become recluse. Maintaining relationships were very difficult. I always felt like just a bad. I was like ruminating thoughts, like you're awful, you're this, you're that, like. And then I would feel better for a minute, especially if I was like feeling really strong spiritually, and then it would happen again. So I remember I probably had them before this, but the first like big one, it was December 19th, and I was at work, and I could not, like it just hit me out of nowhere. And so I had to go down to the break room and like gather myself. And I was like, okay, well that's over. Maybe it's because it's around Christmas time. I started to see a new therapist like in April. And it was fine. Like we were, you know, she was like, I think you're HSP. And she wasn't really like a fan of medication. She was like, you know, let's try walking and this, you know, things to help regulate your nervous system and stuff. Like HSP is a highly sensitive person, so you absorb, and you know, you handle things different. You feel things to a very high level. And so I was feeling better, and I was talking to one of my god sister, and she was like, Jess, it was just a really rough time. I don't even know what was going on. I can't even say what's going on at that time, but I just remember not feeling great. And she was like, I really think you should consider medication. And it wasn't that I was opposed to it, but I was just like, not me. You know, like, what does that mean about me if I have to take medication? And she's a huge advocate on mental health because her father, who's a pastor, went all these years, like, just on autopilot, doing all the things he thought he should do, blah, 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 blah. And at 80-something years old, like, has a literal mental break. And it was, like, the roughest year and some change of their lives, like 2 years. So at that point, they all went to, like, family therapy. They dug into their history, and it was, like, a thing in their family. So I'm like, yeah, okay. No, I'll walk, and I'll journal, and I'll do these things. Last year, I moved back home from Georgia, and nothing was wrong. Nothing was inherently wrong, right? Like, my money was okay. I had a new car. Nothing was wrong, right? And anything that was wrong was, like, not me. It was just ways that I could add to myself. Like, yeah, my sister, like, got sick and stuff like that, but nothing was inherently wrong. And I felt like garbage. And I was like, what's the problem? November 21, I had a panic attack at work. Out of nowhere. Just hit me. And then I had them, like, over the course of the next couple of months. That's when I started to see a therapist. One day I couldn't even go to work. And I woke up in tears. Like, I lifted my head off the pillow and I was in full-blown tears. So I talked to the lady I started seeing, and that's when she told me, she was like, I believe you deal with moderate anxiety. And then she said, I do think a lot of this is generated by, like, grief. And so a few sessions in, she was like, Jessica, you haven't dealt with loss from, like, when you were a kid. She was like, not just the loss of your mom, but the loss of what you did not have with your parents. So, like, she was like, you're holding so much grief and you haven't processed it. So I haven't seen her in a while. Circumstantially, you know, I'll be going back to work through some of those things. I had another panic attack in April. We were in the grocery store, and I thought I was going to lose my marbles. It was Meyer. It was super busy, and I was like, y'all have to get me out of here. Like, get me out of here. And no one had ever seen me have one. Like, they were always, like, really private. And I was in the car with my sister and my niece, and I just, like, burst. I could, and it always manifests that way. And then once it kind of comes out, it depends on, sometimes they last a long time, sometimes it's short. And then the final straw was last week, Monday. And now I haven't been feeling great like the last few months. I like to consider myself like an optimistic person, like, you know, just a bubbly personality, except when I'm not, you know, like, and I could not find any kind of, I felt emotionless. I felt, it just was not, it didn't feel good. And there were other things going on in my life, but I was just like, this is awful. Like, I don't like this, you know? And last Monday, I had a panic. I had another one. And I haven't even felt emotional. And I was sitting down watching TV, and, like, tears just started to come out of my eyes. And I was like, oh, what's happening? You know, like, because I didn't feel like, there was no emotion attached to what was happening physically. And I was like, what is going on?
It's like being possessed by a ghost.
Yes,
like
I was
a sad
like,
ghost came
I was
in
like,
your body.
squeezing my tear ducts. What's happening?
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, well, maybe it's the song that's playing on this show. Anyway, I was tired. I get up. I go to bed. I literally lay down and pandemonium, and it lasted for like 45 minutes. And it's something about being at home by yourself in the dark, having a whole, like, uncontrollable, like, it took me about an hour to, like, finally calm down enough to go to sleep. And I woke up the next morning and I called you, and I was still, like, a mess. And I went to the doctor. I made a doctor appointment. Luckily, thankfully, she had appointments the next day.
With the best nurse practitioner
She
in the
is
world, Kayla Garrett
the
at
best.
Trinity Health in Livonia. I don't care. I'll shout her out if you need a doctor. She's everything.
She was fantastic. So prior to this, I went to the doctor in December. And my god sister had been talking, and I think we had been talking a little bit, and she was like, Jess, you really should try something. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I was scared about what it means to get on medication and find the right one for you. Like, I didn't want to go through that. And I still didn't know what it meant for me to take a pill every day. Like, girl, you crazy. You know? So I went to see the doctor. She prescribed something for me then. But I wasn't comfortable because she was like, oh, you have anxiety and depression?
I know.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, sis. You know, I might just be sad for the season. But when I went to see Dr. Garrett, she was so wonderful because she sat and she talked to you. And she kind of, obviously she can't sit and have a whole 2-hour conversation. But she asked enough clarifying questions to kind of get some history and find out what's going on and why you're feeling. And to be able to prescribe you the best thing for you. I started taking it. I've been taking it about a week and some change. And I feel so much better, right? And I was like, now they said it's supposed to take like 2 weeks for this to work. And I feel fine. Like, maybe I don't need it. Maybe it was just a moment. But I've committed to it just to see. Like, I don't know if it's a matter of, like, resolving some things and maybe I won't need it. I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah.
But I know I feel better. And I feel clear-headed. And I feel like now I can attack the things that I want to attack. I can, with a clear mind, do the things that I want to do. I feel motivated to make changes that I want to make. You know what I mean? Like, I'm clear enough to make decisions. Where before I was just like, bro, this probably sounds so awful. Like, throw me over a bridge. It's a wrap. Like, I felt like, how much longer is life? And I had that ruminating thought over and over. Like, how much longer do I have to live? Because I don't think I can do this much longer.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you called me, and I know, like, I had shared with you what I had went through, and, you know, my symptoms were, similarly, I had panic attacks, but they were overthinking that someone was in my house when the kids weren't home. And at first I was like, well, this is weird. I've never done this before. Like, I watch scary movies all the time. Like, how could I possibly be scared in this house by myself? I'm so strong and brave, right? But, you know, one night I just couldn't relax, and I was like, well, I'm gonna hit my weed pen, and that'll help me. Did not help me. So then I started getting so scared and paranoid that someone was in my house. I started, like, going room to room with a screwdriver, and I was like, I'm gonna find this guy. And then I, like,
About how this stuff has you so irrational that you have a screwdriver. Because
I had to have a weapon.
like, isn't it crazy?
I had to have a weapon. What am I gonna do? Walk around with no weapon? I still would do that right now. So me and my screwdriver, you know, I set it on the table next to the bed. I lay down and I'm like, go to sleep. And I was like, what if the person was moving from room to room when I was looking, so I didn't find them? And then I was like, this is bullshit. I called my friend Emily, who lives like a quarter mile down the road. I'm like, can I come stay the night at your house? And that was kind of like a red flag for me in my own, you know. I was thinking maybe it was just a one-time thing, and maybe it was just because I hit my weed pen. Like, maybe it was like a, you know. But it kept happening, and it, you know, would get like more severe where like I couldn't sleep. And then obviously my therapist was like, you know, I think you should probably, you know, you're feeling worse than usual, and it's not connected to anything that you're waiting for, you know. Like, my motivation was down. I was tired all the time. And like, when I first went and saw Kayla Garrett, I told her, I was like, I feel like, and I know that she has a kid too, and I'm like, I remember that tired when you have a newborn and they don't sleep, and you're just like on autopilot, and you don't remember driving to work, and you're just so drained. I said, it feels like that, but I'm getting enough sleep. That's how it felt to me. I felt so tired, and no amount of caffeine was helping me. I would sleep like 7-8 hours a night. I would probably be like a little restless, but I still was like in bed for that long and sleeping decent, and I just couldn't stop being tired. And I was just, you know, more irrational, more paranoid, more nervous that like something bad was going to happen, or, you know. So when I talked to my therapist, and I just kind of mentioned like, oh, well, you know, I have thought about medication, but I'm nervous. Like, what if it doesn't agree with me at first? That was like my worst fear. What if I have like some bad reaction to it, or, you know, I don't know if I want to be on something forever, like similarly, you know, to like how you explained. And she said, here's the thing. If you had a heart condition, you would easily take the medication for the heart. You would take it because you want to have more joy in your, you want to have a long, happy life. You would take that medication for that illness. For our brains, it's the same way. You can't help that your brain doesn't make enough serotonin or dopamine. You cannot help that. And especially when you're feeling really bad, you can't even do the things that could give you more, like exercise or getting outside in the sun, you know, stuff like that, because you feel so bad. Like, I definitely wasn't getting my ass to the gym. I wasn't doing any, I would barely drink enough water, you know. She said, but you know, you will take it for your heart or like something for your body. When it's your brain, people are more hesitant. So that made sense. And then when I went and saw our nurse practitioner, she said, you know, we have tools to make you enjoy your life better and for you to be happier. Why the hell wouldn't you take it? Said it just like that. And I was like, I love this lady. Because she was right. Like, we have these things to help us feel better. And it's common, and people just don't talk about it, so you don't realize how common it is, and it's not something to be ashamed of, you know. So I felt good, and I will say that I did try one medication first, Lexapro. Was it Lexapro? I think so. And I took that for 2 days, and I did have a reaction to it. The first 2 days, though, I was walking on sunshine. I felt awesome. I was like, I could feel it immediately. So
I'm not crazy.
No,
because I'm like, maybe
I took 25 milligrams the first 2 days. I was like, I want to take this forever. I feel awesome. I remember that feeling because it's like a little duller, like with what I'm on now, but I can tell the difference. But with Lexapro, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Immediately. The second night, though, it was the night before my son's 7th birthday party. The second night, I was laying in bed, minding my business, and all of a sudden, and, you know, Kayla had mentioned, if you have any intrusive thoughts, something that pops up in your head and you just think, you know, that's kind of weird, that's weird, that doesn't belong there, and that hasn't happened before, that feels wrong. Stop taking it and just know that it's a medication. And she said, and then we'll come up with a new medication for you. But that scared me still. So I took the Lexapro, and like I said, that second night, I laid in bed and I was thinking, I'm going to sleepwalk. And I'm going to, like, either hurt myself or I'm going to hurt my kids somehow, and I'll have sleptwalked and I won't even know that I did it. And I would never hurt my kids. Like, you know what I mean? But, like, that thought was there, and then I was like, oh my God, what if I do that? And my mom had warned me too. She said, you know, it took a little bit of time for me to get used to my meds, and I did try several things first before I found that Prozac worked for me. So this might be one that doesn't work for you. Because she was surprised that, you know, they started me on something different than her, because they do say if something worked for a family member that also, you know, has struggled, and, you know, that it might work for you too. So I called my mom. It was like late, and like, bless my mom's heart, she was like, honey, you're doing the right thing. This is exactly what you're supposed to do when you feel this way, is you reach out and you know, you tell somebody who will understand, who can come be with you. She's like, I'll come stay the night as long as you need me to. Even though, like, we both had Eli's birthday party the next day, like, I knew, but I was like sobbing. I was like hyperventilating, thinking that I would hurt my kids, you know, and I would never. And I knew, because she had said that, I knew that it was an intrusive thought, and I knew that it was because of the medication, and then I knew that because it was there and it shouldn't be there, that it wasn't like me, and I knew it was illogical, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. So my mom came, stayed the night with me, and then, you know, I ended up going on a different medication, and when I explained what happened, they gave me an additional, so I went on Prozac. And she started me at a very low dosage, because obviously it was like, oh, 25 is too much for you. But I started at 10 milligrams for a few weeks, went up to 20, now I'm at 40, and that's like a really good place for me. And then she also prescribed Atarax for the panic attacks, because when I get like all like fidgety and like, oh my God, I'm gonna die type deal, or like something's really, really wrong, which still happens, you know, mostly it's like triggered by something now, like being by myself or getting nervous about that blood test. So then I take that, and it's an antihistamine, and it just kind of like chills me out, and usually makes me like sleep good. So that, you know, that was my journey, and I am grateful that I did it. So I can't imagine. And, you know, something that I wanted to mention too, is that, you know, you always see memes and posts and stuff on social that is like, if you are feeling suicidal, call this hotline. Nobody ever tells you what to do if somebody in your life calls you and says, I am feeling this way, I don't want to be alive anymore, which happened to me recently and was terrifying, and I called you because I didn't know what to do. And you said, you know, in like this, hopefully like you won't mind, but you know, this was my kid's dad. He called me one morning when he had them, and said, you know, I couldn't understand him, so I thought he butt dialed me because I couldn't hear anybody talking. And this was in June, and I couldn't hear anybody talking, and then I realized that he was so upset that like he couldn't talk. And then he finally just said, you know, like, I don't want to be alive anymore. And I was like, okay, like, stay there. You know, I called you because I didn't know what the hell to do. And then thankfully you told me to get him to the hospital, and that they would like know how to take care of him. So I like run out of the house, and I called his parents and told them to meet me there. Like, I told them what happened. I was like running on pure adrenaline. And this was after I had gone on medication, so I even like talked to my therapist about it after, and she said, I think because you were on the medication, you handled it a lot better than if you hadn't started it already. You know, so he, you know, his parents took him to the hospital. I got my kids. He was there for 6 days. He got, you know, on medication. He got therapy, group therapy. And I'm not sharing this, you know, to share somebody else's experience, but it was also my experience, because it was very traumatic, and I was scared for my kids, and I was scared for him. He's the dad of my kids. And I want people to know that if that does happen to you and someone in your life reaches out, that they can go to the hospital. You know, I just want to like throw that out there, because I did not know. I was like, oh, do I have them call this 800? No, I don't. That's the only thing I've ever seen, you know. And I think that sometimes it's harder for men. I think it's actually like completely harder for men to feel open to talk about their mental health struggles. But you know, he's doing better now after. So you know, if men happen to listen to our podcast too, I don't think it's anything to take lightly or to feel ashamed about, you know?
Yeah. Especially when, like, when you've gone through certain things in life, right? Like, I knew what to tell you to do. Did I say that right? That was a funky sentence.
No, you said it.
But
When
I was 18, I don't really know if I was trying, right? Like, at this point, this is like maybe a few months after my dad had gone, or a year later, I can't remember, going back to prison. Excuse me. And me and my mom, sorry y'all.
Okay.
Me and my mom were like butting heads. And now I can say this with clarity because I understand what was happening. Like, I needed a lot of attention. Not in an unhealthy way, but like, you need a lot when you're not getting it at all. Like, I'm like, hug me, acknowledge me, and then I'll go about my business, read a book in the corner, and I'm fine, right? Like, I'm very emotional. So, like, words of affirmation were probably super important to me, and I didn't know, right? Like, quality time is important to me. I didn't know. Who knows that as a kid, especially in a home where you just kind of like, we're just getting through life, right? So a lot had occurred. And so my mom and I were getting into it for months. So for weeks, I was like entertaining the idea of like committing suicide. I would take a walk and I would consider, we lived on the corner of Haggerty and Palmer and Kent. And I would consider like jumping off. Like, one day I was curling my hair and I was like, what if I tied this? And I was like, am I really serious? You know what I'm saying? Like, but it was like for weeks. And I felt like there was nothing I can do right. Like, I was just a mess and it would be better. Like, all these thoughts. At that time, I just thought I was just being like an attention hog. In no way did I think, you know. So one day it got really bad. And I just felt like, this is it. I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, me and my mom had gotten into it again. I can't even remember for what. And I just feel like I am not good enough. There's nothing wrong. There's something wrong. Get out of my chest. So I had just purchased a bottle of Excedrin. I would get really bad headaches all the time. And one night I was like, she was gone. She and my younger sister were gone. And I made a pallet on the side of my bed. I don't know why. I don't know what that pallet on the side of my bed was going to do. But I took the whole bottle of Excedrin and I washed it down with a swig of vinegar just to add a little final touch. Nothing happened because it wasn't enough. But when they got home, I was panicking, freaking out. My mom went in her room, got on, was like, whatever, And I started to freak out, and I told my younger sister. So we called my older sister, and she was like, she was telling me all this stuff to try to do. And then I called 911, and I hung up. I freaked out, and I hung up. And they called back, and I tried to pretend like I was an adult. Obviously, they sent 2 police officers. Long story short, I'm taken in the ambulance. They call my mom downstairs, and she's like, her dad just, whatever, went to prison, and blah. And I'm glaring at her, and I'm like, sis, he's not here. Now, probably, looking back again, all of that was woven together. So they kept me in the emergency room. It was mortifying. It was just mortifying. The next day, they sent me next door to the psych ward to be evaluated, and I was alone. And I was sitting in the waiting room. After they did the evaluation of me, I was sitting in the waiting room, and my oldest sister walked in. And I was like, I just burst into tears because it was so lonely. Like, my mom she had no idea what to do. Like, I have so much compassion for her in that moment because she had no idea what to do with any of that, right? I can't imagine what it would feel like as a parent. I don't know. We never, ever talked about it, though. They let me go home about 5 o'clock. We get home, and when I walk into the house, like, no one knows what to say. It's the most unnerving, awkward scenario. And my sister, helps me get a shower and go to bed, and then we never talked about it again. Like, ever. So when it started to happen, and I'm thinking of these thoughts more often, I'm like, And it's like so vulnerable because you're like, dang, what's wrong with me, right? But I think it's maybe more important to say if there is something I can do so that I'm like even and healthy and whole. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to have to take this for the rest of my days. If I do, fine. I don't want to, because there's still a stigma to it, to me.
Sure.
There's no shame in other people that I know that take it. Like, yes,
mm-hmm.
go you. But for me, I'm still having a hard time. Like, does it make me too broken? Does it make me a liability? Does it make me a, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But compared to what I was feeling, I'll take this.
Yeah.
Any day. Yeah.
I had a question. When that happened, did you ever find out like why you wanted to take these pills? And
no, because there was there was like zero conversation. When I think back on it from time to time now, I think there was just a lot of loss, right? Like that year before we were on the court stand in my father's trial. Do you know, like all of these things had occurred, and there was nowhere to do. There was nothing. You didn't know what to do with it, right? Like you just keep going.
Was there any chatter in the house about?
Zero. Well, when I say we did not ever speak about it again, nothing.
Wow.
I think not in disclaimer to everybody that listens or watches this podcast. We are not medical professionals. We're just sharing our own experiences and what has helped us and what we've been through. But I wonder, like something I've thought about myself is that after starting to feel good on this medication, I'm like, what if I would have went on this 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. What if I would have went on this when I was a teenager? Like, I wonder if I could have balanced things much sooner.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's like you have always been anxious, you know? And I know that I've always been anxious. Mm-hmm. I think back to like how I was as a kid and the things that I worried about. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it in my son, and I'm like, damn, that was me. He got that from me, you know? But I don't know if you want to touch on like what you were going through, because I think when you're already like, you know, going through bad things, and then you're fighting with your mom over all this stuff, and then you're already feeling anxious, like sometimes it just makes you feel like over the edge. Yeah. And I haven't gotten to the place where I've felt suicidal. I've felt the feeling where I'm like, everyone would be better off without me. Like if my kids had a better mom, if, you know what I mean? Like, and when I was married, like, have a better wife, like I suck, like I can't do right by any of you, you know? But I never felt like I wanted to end my life, so that's not something that I can completely relate to. Like, I can understand why someone would get there, but I guess, like, do you think it was like a mixture of things, or do you think it was the time period, or?
I'm sure it was a ton of things. Like, we didn't talk, there was no communication in my home, in growing up, right? Like, outside of like surface stuff or just fun and laughter or whatever, we had no serious conversations. I was probably the most like in tune. Like I would I would go in my room and I would get myself hyped up, like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to my mom about this. No tools, didn't know how to handle it, didn't even understand, like, she would have to have the emotional capacity for it. My mom by no means was a dumb woman, but there was considering things from now that I'm a woman and looking at the things that she had to deal with, since I don't have it, right? Like, I just want to keep you all alive, right? So I was aware of a lot of things because I read and I researched and all, you know, so I would want to talk about, like, this happened, Mom, and how come, and it wasn't to attack her, it was like to get clarity and understanding, like, I'm coming across this information and it's making sense and I want to talk about it and I want to, you know, whatever. But we didn't talk about anything. When my dad was arrested for the murder of our neighbor, and
if you don't mind, can you elaborate on, like, do you feel comfortable, like, sharing that part?
Yeah.
Because I think that it's, like, something very I know your, you know, I know your story, I know, but I don't know if that's something you want to share openly, but it might be, you know, one, it's a huge thing. Yeah. Like, I can't imagine having dealt with that at that age, especially. And then, like, maybe, like, other people can, like, relate to something like that.
I'm okay with that. my, and I probably alluded to some of this in other episodes, but my father was in and out of prison my whole life for drugs. So 5 year stints here, 3 year stints here, 2 years, or sometimes my mom would just send him away. My mom raised us the best she could, right? Like, God, I don't like saying it like that, because we were really good. We were fine. We were fed. We were clean. We weren't raised in a typical household for the nature of what my father's crimes were. She protected us fiercely. She was definitely like a mama, like, she was fierce. So she protected us from a lot of the things that she experienced as a woman married to someone who had these proclivities. We didn't learn until we were like in our adult years that she would have to go like get her car from the, because my dad would have sold it to the, these are things that were happening. We had no idea. One guy came to the house late at night asking her where my dad was and for money. And she would tell them, like, you gotta go. Like, I don't owe you money. You go find him. Things that someone else would, like, get their block knocked off for, like, she was protecting and covering. I have to attribute that to God, you know. So anyway, my father came home October 2002 after being in prison for 5 years. We thought this was it. Like, we're going to live this happy, full, you know, regular old life now. My parents were still married. About 2 months in, and I won't go into all details or whatever, about 2 months in, he was on a binge. And that was the first time my mom couldn't protect me. I came home from school one day and he was home. He had been gone 4 days. I asked him what happened. And he tells me, and I believe it. I have no other reason not to. My mom comes home. She's walking up the stairs. I look at her and I'm like, Mom, guess what Dad told you? Guess what happened? And I start telling her. And she looks at me and she just shakes her head no. I feel like innocence left at that point, because immediately I knew this wasn't, like, I don't even know how I knew. Everything within me knew. So that whole year was a lot of that. One of those times he sold my car. My mom had, you know, worked really hard to buy that car for me. He sold my car to a drug dealer. He was supposed to go take it to get it fixed. He took me to work. I was working at McDonald's. He sold it. The next day I got it back. My niece's dad ended up behind my car. These women also wrote checks in my name. I had a checking account with my mom from National City Bank. My purse was in my car because my dad was supposed to bring me my car. So they had wrote checks at a bunch of places, right? These details matter because when you sit back and think about what happened, like, these are, so you feel really unprotected, and you got no justice because this is your father's doing. If we report them, it traces back to him, then he goes. So there was no one said, I'm so sorry this happened to you. No one did any of that. It was just like, it is what it is. It happened. I can't do nothing about it. So then you swallow it and you push it down and you're infuriated and you feel lonely and you feel upset and you feel like. So November, we're skipping school. And we drive past our complex and we see all these police cars. They're near our building, but we like, go. I don't know, these police, they weren't going to see us. But we were like, hurry up, we got to get
They're
to
here
school.
for us. Yeah.
We get home from school. They're out there. The coroner's truck is out there, whatever. Our next door neighbor was murdered. That morning, my younger sister and I were running late for school. We were always running late. And we heard a lot of thumping around. And we were nervous because probably like a month or so before, my dad was on another binge. And he came knocking on the door wanting to be let into the house. And my mom was at work. So she had told us before she left for work that morning, she said, if your dad comes, don't open the door for him. So we were already on edge because we didn't live in this kind of chaos. We never lived, at least we had never experienced this level of chaos prior to now. We were raised in a very peaceful, baby, we couldn't watch The Simpsons. We watched Andy Griffin and Brady Bunch and, the Olsen twins. So this level of chaos was unsettling. This is stuff you see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear all this knocking around, so we're arguing about who needs to start the car because it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
So finally my younger sister, like, somehow I convinced her to do it. She runs out and does it. But it was just all this noise going on. We get home from school, the detectives come upstairs, they ask us, did we hear anything? The only thing we tell them was we heard a bunch of knocking around, which was abnormal. It was just a young lady and her daughter who lived underneath, or, below us. A month later, I come home from, now at this point, me and my father are not talking. I don't even remember what led up to me just having a disdain for him. But we are not speaking. Like, I can't stand him at this point. Maybe a few weeks before all of this happens, I did something silly, or I would watch football and basketball with him. I was watching a basketball game, so I started watching a basketball game by myself. So I was watching it, and I couldn't find the remote or something, and I was tossing the pillows around. My father was never physical. Even when he would, like, discipline us, it would be, like, with the softest little belt, and then there was, like, this lecture, and we were all friends and happy again. And my father was a nice, like, kind, gentle, whatever one. Like, just not realizing then, like, he was making up for his crap, right? Mm-hmm. My mom had to be a disciplinarian. My mom was I remember when my mom stopped being nurturing. She was very nurturing. She knew exactly what to do with my sensitive self. You know what I mean? Like, I would spend the night at other people's houses, and I would come home and I would just cry in her lap because I just missed her, and I didn't know how to articulate that. Like, I remember her being nurturing, and then she wasn't. So anyway, a month later, I come home from school. It's December, and the two detectives that questioned us the month before, they're at the house, and they're questioning my dad. I'm not talking to him. I get ready. I go to work. Work came around the corner. I go to work. My mom calls me, and she says, "Come home. We have to go to the police station. They want to question us. They took your dad." So we go to the police station. They have us separated. So my mom is somewhere else. My sister is somewhere else. And I'm by myself somewhere else. And they question us. And then they let us go. We meet in the lobby. My dad walks past us, and they're taking him, and they're booking him. January, we get a summons to go to court because we were home and we heard the noise. They wanted, they were trying to create a trial. Obviously, our family was distraught. And this time we couldn't go. Like, they ran out of time, so we didn't get on the stand. So they pushed court back to May. So in May, my senior year of high school, we go back to court, and we have to get on now we have time, and we get on the stand. And they question us. All I can tell you is there's the thumping around. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything, whatever. And the reason they connected it to my dad is because this young lady's vehicle was at my uncle's house in Detroit. I don't know all the details. Long story short, my mom asked him to take a plea because she said, my babies are not going to, they're not about to go through this. So you need to take a plea. The judge already told you when you got out, if you came back for anything, you were never coming home. So it doesn't even matter. Like, they're not going through this. Mm-hmm. Because when you live in a household and you just kind of sweep everything under Jesus. Jesus is not the culprit. Jesus is great. But nobody knows what to... So we never talked about this either. We went to dinner after. Like, the people from our church came to support us. We went to dinner after. We went home. It's not until even right now talking about this for months, guys, I slept in my mom's room. I was 17 years old. We had to move. That's how we ended up in Canton. When I met you at McDonald's, we left the apartment because when me and my younger sister were off at Cass Tech with our youth group singing Christmas songs to the folks at Cass. My mom was at work. We come home, we can't get in the door. The police had kicked the door in, rummaged to the house. My mom was like, I can't live here. We go in the house, pillows, everything is like overturned. It was bizarre. So she was like, we gotta go. And for about 3 or 4 months, I slept in my mom's room. Didn't even make the connection till right now. Like, I did not even feel comfortable to like sleep like I'm 17.
Well, when you go through something like that, you were so young, first of all, and please don't slap me. I am so sorry that your dad couldn't be what you deserved as a dad. And I know, like, we all have like our childhood trauma, but like, there are two people in this world that you expect to protect you above everything at all costs, and it's your parents. And he betrayed that, and it wasn't even by all his times going to prison. It was by him taking something from you, and you had to feel not only betrayed by him, but also like somebody's like, that's so personal for somebody to use your checkbook, and like it's just these random strangers that got it from him somehow. Like, that's awful that your dad couldn't protect you. But I'm also really sorry that you didn't get to talk about it. Like, I can't imagine going through something that traumatic and then like ignoring it like that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't even know. Right now, I'm like, I don't even know if it... I'm sure it may have done some good if we talked about it. I don't think anybody even knew how to talk about it, what to... Like, so we were moving on Christmas Day. And so every year after that, my mom would have this Christmas party. And after, like, a certain amount of years, I'm like, Mom, I'm sick of this. No, like, let's do something different. And then I finally learned, like, probably like a year before she passed, that her reasoning for throwing these like lavish Christmas parties every year was to wipe away the stain of us having to move that on that Christmas weekend on Christmas. Like, we put our last load in the house Christmas Day. She still managed to make some kind of dinner, but she was trying to wipe away the stain of what that... She felt so guilty that we went through that we had to go through that for years she was just trying to wipe away the stain of what that looked like. So because I'm like a communicator, didn't even realize it then. I just would want to figure things out. I knew I didn't like how... I don't even know how I ran into the information I did to make me say, hey, something is off. Something's not right, you know? So when I look back at things and even talking about it now and bringing it up, like, no wonder. You know, no wonder I struggle with these things sometimes. That's why part of me is like, is this like trauma-induced? If I start to resolve some of this, how much will this go away? It's okay if it's not. It's okay if this is something I deal with. You know what I mean? But like, there's a lot of... I don't know, there's just a lot of it that maybe it still affects me to this day. I think it has in a lot of ways. Like, even how and I've said this before, how a relationship with,
Of course,
with men, or how I have to want things that are normal, like protection and love and stability, and but not even know how to receive it, because I'll do it myself. I learned early, do it yourself. Because if you try to talk to somebody about it, they're going to be like, girl, go, get away, you know. Or you just don't have anybody to talk to about it. So escapism, you know, so, yeah.
Can I ask you, this is like kind of personal, I'm sure you've like considered it before, but I'm hoping it's not offensive. Have you ever wondered if your dad struggled with some sort of mental illness, and maybe the drugs was like his self-medicating?
I'm almost certain. I'm like almost certain that he did. You have to like, because the things that made my dad like amazing to me was like his mind, and he was charming and sweet, and he was great. You know what I mean? Like, there were aspects of him that were really great. I didn't see these parts of him until I got older. So to have to struggle with whatever he was struggling with for all those years and resort to drugs, it had to be something. It had to be something. His life of crime started when he was like 17. So, I'm sure.
And that was a hard age for you too, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you say like that the best part about him was his mind, because I think there still is a stigma about mental health and how like, oh, ooh, that's scary, that's crazy, you gotta take medicine. Well, But the thing about people with mental illness, and, you know, I know I want to talk about Untamed in a minute here, but one thing that's mentioned in that book by Glennon Doyle is that people with anxiety and depression are like the best people. Their brains are so cool. We're the most passionate of people, the most empathetic of people, the most creative of people. Intense personalities in like a good way, and sometimes it's bad, and sometimes we like try to like tone it down with things. But most creatives are also struggling, and they, you know, and usually when people are using art, it's to release some of that.
Yeah.
So one good point of that book, and you know, we'll go on to that eventually, is that we need their science because they need our art. And I really liked that.
I really liked that too.
So when you talk about your dad's brain, like, of course you were drawn to it, and like it's, and you know, maybe he struggled with similar things that he wasn't self-aware about, and it was a different time. Like I said, like maybe had he had some help or people in his life to like say like, hey, have you thought about doing this instead of this, you know? Because I wonder that about like some of my family members that like we've lost. Like if someone would have just said like, hey, do you think you could talk to somebody? But they were both males, and I think that that's even harder. It's like for men to seek that help and to know that they need it and to not feel embarrassed about it. Not that it's not hard for women. I just think there's like an extra stigma, you know, because like, you know, women are put into this category of being nurturers and more emotional and caregivers, and then men are like supposed to be like this rock, this stoic being that carries, you know. So I think it's a little bit harder for somebody to feel vulnerable, you know, when you're supposed to be stoic and like the, you know, one that, you know. Anyways.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I'm sure he did share this story with me one time, and we'll move on or whatever.
I'll say here's on you.
And he walked in on his oldest brother, who he idolized, commit suicide. And he said he felt like that's when things changed for him. I have a lot of compassion. My dad was one of my favorite people. Like,
how old was he when that happened?
He was probably like 16. I don't know about anything else, you know what I mean, like a ton of details. He's one of my favorite people to talk to right now personally. I'm still sorting through the man that I like, who broke my heart, and the man that I absolutely enjoy. You know what I mean? Like, because the memory I have of him is, my memories are great. Because my mom made sure we only saw that. And maybe he made sure we only saw that. So it's a very conflicting place to exist. Because I do feel a lot of compassion for him. I just don't know how to allow him in. Without it being detrimental to me. Because I've had to say he wasn't a father because he couldn't be. He never fathered us. He couldn't. He was away too much. So right now, while he's incarcerated, he still has these proclivities, right? He still leans toward like victimization and things like that. So I don't know how to resolve that, to at least allow each other to enjoy the best part of ourselves together. I'm still stuck there.
I think too that it probably feels like he's multiple people. Because you've seen, and this might be like a good like segue into Untamed, because she mentions, one, I want to mention, I'm usually not like at least lately, usually I am a murder mystery book girl. Usually I'm not a reader at all. So usually I would read murder mystery books, and like that's my thing. But my hairdresser and friend Lauren recommended, after us talking about like different life things that, you know, we've experienced, and we say that we basically have the same mom, so we've talked about a lot of like, you know, relationship stuff. She recommended Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and she kind of gave me the gist of the book. of, you know, this Christian woman that, you know, was kind of like an alcoholic and a substance abuser and was bulimic and ends up like getting married and having kids, and then, you know, she's just unhappy and still like doing all these old habits, and she falls in love with a woman, and everything about like her, she questions like everything, you know, like how, why I'm Christian, what, but, and I'm usually not that type of book person, like the real experience of someone, or like a growth book, or like a relatable thing. And I didn't know if I was in the mood for it, but it is genuinely probably the best book I've ever read. Genuinely, as far as, you know, like nonfiction goes. So I just wanted to mention one chapter called Invaders. And I read it shortly before I knew we were going to have this, we were going to do this episode. And she talks about how anxiety and depression are body snatchers. They rob you of, you know, like joy and all the things. And she was saying, like, you know, my problems were never alcoholism, bulimia. My issues were anxiety, clinical anxiety and depression. Those were my actual issues, you know. Those were the things that I needed to fix. And the way she describes anxiety and depression, I've never considered myself a depressed person. I didn't think that I'd experienced that. The anxiety I get because the tightness, the, you know, the worrying, like all of that feels like what I understand about anxiety. But when she explained how depression feels, I was like, oh, no, that's both for sure for me. Because she explains anxiety as the high, like the Tigger and the Eeyore, like the high is Tigger, like that's your anxiety, like the bouncy, the moving, the, you know, and then the depression is Eeyore, that's your low, like your low self. So when she talks about depression, she explains it in a way that says it takes all of like your vibrant colors away from you and just makes you feel gray. You feel, because I always picture it as like I can't get out of bed. It's rainy, like I can't get out of bed. I can't do anything. So I was like, well, I haven't felt that before, so I can't be depressed. But that gray, like something stealing your vibrancy, and then like sinking. And I was like, wow, I felt that before. And then she explains her anxiety as like the hovering, the worrying, the obsessing, the, you know, trying to, like, you always feel like you're in fear, like survival mode, you know, that's what it's like for me. And then I wanted to go into these tips, because we had kind of talked about this already. She mentions 5 pro tips for managing people, or like for people to manage how to live high and low. And I was like, oh wow, that sounds like, because even talking about how the other day I was like low all day, and then like the next day I was like, wait, what? This is not, I feel like 2 different people. And you know, so her first tip is to take your damn meds. She says, take your damn meds. And she says, like, with your medication you can suffer less and live more. And I had never thought about it that way, because I was like, it's going to take away a piece of me. If I take medicine, I'm going to feel less like me. It's going to take away some of like these things that I think are great about myself.
Yep, that was very much my fear.
So her number 2 is keep taking your damn meds. Because she says the same thing that my mom kind of did, is that, you know, people will be like, that must have been a fluke. I didn't actually need these meds. I feel good now. It must have just been something I was going through. And then people stop taking it, and then it'll either get worse or like come back faster. And she used the metaphor of like, okay, when it's raining outside and you have an umbrella, you're staying dry under the umbrella. You don't throw your umbrella away because you're like, I'm dry now, because you'll still get wet, you know. And that really, you know, sat with me, you know, like I know that I have to stay on it. Like I feel good about it. And then number 3 was to take notes from your low self to your high self. And I tried that without even knowing it. And I know, like I was telling you about that yesterday. What I did before going on medication is I wrote how bad I was feeling. All the things I was experiencing, what my body felt like what my emotions were, and so that I would know how I felt, you know, like if I ended up feeling differently. But she says, you know, with your low self, if you write down, like, here's how I feel, especially if you're used to making doctor's appointments or like an appointment with your therapist, if you write down, you know, I'm feeling this way, I feel scared, I feel alone, I feel sad, I feel like I wasn't motivated today, I feel like a failure, like I'm scared of this, this, and this. You'll make an appointment, and then a few days later, you're like, I don't even remember that person. Who was that? Like, I don't know what to tell you. I guess I was sad.
Yep.
So she says to write down when you're feeling low, to remind your high self of what it felt like in case you need to tell your doctor, or just to remind yourself of how it can feel sometimes. And then for your high self, you can, and low self, you can do the same thing, like vice versa. Like write notes when you're feeling good. Like, you know what? Like, you actually worked really hard today. You love your kids. You love being a mom.
Yeah.
You love being outside in the fall. Like, you love your house. You're proud of this, this, and this, and you're grateful for these things. So that when you're low, you're like, oh, sometimes I am happy.
Yeah.
I guess I'll wait for that to come back, you know? And I thought that was a really good thing. So, she also said that you should know your buttons. And she compared it to like those Staples commercials where you hit the easy button. So she said, like the easy things are like drinking, napping, binging, you know, like unhealthy like habits. Like those are the easy things. Like if I drink, if I smoke, I'll feel better. Like if I go shopping, like that's one that I do pretty often. Where I'm like, I'm sad. What's Amazon got for me today? But instead, coming up with the things are real resets. Meditation, prayer, you know, if you're spiritual, religious. And then her top one, though, is to drink a glass of water. And I thought that was a really good one. Because she said, you know, sometimes I'll be like, I hate my job, I need a new career, I need a new this, I need a new that, I need to change this, this, and this. And she'll be like, actually, I think what I need is to drink a damn glass of water.
Let me tell you something. One time I thought I had COVID. And I was like, oh my God, I have the COVID. Like, what's going on? You know, whatever.
Corona.
I got the corona. Baby, I was dehydrated. And I was frustrated and sad and just feeling like, oh, I don't want to do anything. What's wrong with me or whatever. And I drank some water. And I was like, it feels so good.
Yes.
Like, girl, you were thirsty.
I'm a new
you were thirsty. That's all that was wrong with you.
Yep.
So, yeah, I know.
Yep. And then the last one, like we kind of like already talked about, is it to remember that we're the best kind of people. You know, and we kind of already talked about that. Like people that deal with these things make connections with other people that feel those things and are open and empathetic and have really deep emotions and are passionate and want to help and get their hearts broken more because they feel harder. And, you know, and then she made the point of we need their science so that we can give them our art, like so that we can give them our poetry, so that we can give them our painting, so that we can give them our music, you know, our writing, whatever it may be. They need that from us, and we need the science so that we can like live good lives, better lives, happier lives, more joyful lives, and suffer less, you know. And she also said we need to be our true selves and in order to change the world. And I thought that was big. And I think like we get to be our true selves and we don't feel like trash. And I know personally after going on medication, and I was saying this to you guys, you know, earlier, like the amount of fucks that I give now have reduced substantially. Like things I would worry about and try to plan for that were like completely made up scenarios for me. Like I haven't been doing that as much. And then like even getting the scrape on my head, I was going out with this giant stupid looking Band-Aid on my head, like to wherever. I did not care. I went everywhere. I was like, I don't care, I fell. You know, like before I would have been like, oh my God, how am I going to cover this up? Like what if somebody asked me this? And I was just like, I don't give a shit, I'm going to tell them I fell, you know? So anyways, I highly, highly recommend Untamed by Glennon Doyle, she talks about a lot of different things, mental health, and like anything you can think of, you know, she talks about, and I think it's like a great book for anybody.
So I'm glad you read it, because I listened to a podcast interview with her and my favorite, Brene Brown. And I was like, I've got to get this book. And I downloaded it on my Audible, I told you, because I wanted to listen to it. But I'm also still very much a pen and paper, hand holding. I want to read the book. So thank you for bringing it for me today, because I listened to this interview and I was in love with this lady. I went and found her on Instagram. And it just makes my heart like super happy when I find something that resonates with me, even if I didn't know it. It's not until I hear it and I'm like, you know what I mean? And my ultimate goal, I guess, and things can shift and may be different later, but my ultimate goal is just to like be authentically me. I think in a way I am me, but there are a lot of times where I find myself like hiding because I'm afraid to disappoint, right? Like, I'm afraid that I'll fail someone in some way, right? Or I haven't really defined what it is to be me yet, because I've been dodging what I think is broken. I don't know if that makes sense. And trying to present like my best self according to what I think someone else wants to see. So healing from the core of who I am and owning who I am without like some grand idea that I borrowed from something or someone else. You know? And that's what, when I listen to that interview and I listen to them talk, another good resource is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. She talks a lot about shame, and that's something that I dealt with. And just taking like the things that make us feel so imperfect and using it as like leverage and strength. Like, I don't know, I think my self-esteem was damaged a lot over the course of my life. Not intentionally, I guess, I don't know, but like just healing that place. I read the other day, like when you're healing in the area of self-esteem, your self-efficacy becomes better. Your ability to do and do well, whatever your do is, what you produce, what you put out into the world strengthens. And ultimately, that's my goal. Like when I'm feeling my best, when I'm feeling most inspired, I feel like I have so much to give. After being on this medication now a little over a week, one of my favorite things to do is to like have a little dance party, right? I turn on like soca music or something, and I wiggle around my house and no one's there to judge me. And when I did that the other day, I was like, I'm back. You know what I mean? Like, and I want to feel like my best me. Like I feel like I love, you know, when I love you, I love you. When I care about you, I care about you. And that's what I want to feel all the time. I understand that it won't be like that every day, but like I want to love and care and do and create and be the woman that I like fantasize about on the inside of me. Like I want her to live
And have a chance.
and have a chance. Yeah.
I think that's like a good goal. And me being on medication for this long, like I said, like one of my fears was like that it was going to dull me, like because I am intense as far as emotion, like, and that's not something that I see as a weakness, you know, but when it's hard to function and to do things that usually bring me joy, like that was bad for me. And you know, something that Glennon like mentions is that depression for her was still functioning, still getting out of bed, but forcing it, forcing everything, forcing getting the kids to school, forcing to say you're okay when somebody asks you how you're doing, like forcing being friendly.
It's the worst.
And that was that, I knew that feeling, you know, and I feel like, I mean, you would know if I wasn't me anymore, you'd be like, who the fuck is this? But I still feel like me, but like a way better me. Like, because I care about the things that I hadn't really cared about, you know, and I'm not worrying as much, and I genuinely think that I can be a better mom, you know, and I know it's important to be myself, and to find like the woman like you were talking about. Like I want to be my best self too. I want to find the things that I can contribute, like my strengths to, and feel fulfilled, and but maybe equally I don't want to look back on my kids' childhood and be like, damn, I wish I would have done something to be happier. I feel bad that they had to see a sad mom their whole lives, and like I'm glad that they won't now, because I was afraid of that, because we'd go to the park and I'm like, now I'm like, why don't I enjoy this? Like I love my kids so much, more than anything in the world. They're the best thing that's ever happened to me, but I'm not enjoying it. I'm forcing it, and I'm feeling not like that so much anymore. So like I'm definitely enjoying things better.
I just want to applaud, before we close, I just want to applaud that you chose you for the purposes of for one of the reasons being your children, right? Like you didn't live in pride or like, oh, or whatever, you chose to make sure you were good so they can experience the best parts of you. Like that's just one part of you, motherhood, but I'm proud of you for choosing you.
Thank you.
For you, but choosing you for those babies.
Thank you.
Because I wonder how much, and I'm not in any way upset with my mom at all, like, but I wonder what life would have been like if she didn't have to carry so much and there was an out for her so that she can get the release she needed and be, I think, the mom that she really wanted to be. And she was fantastic. Like, she made everything as celebratory and whatever's possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's easy to think about what was bad, but like when I think about what was good, this lady did her best to make things fantastic for us.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I feel the same way, about my mom. She obviously, like, I think because every human is different, it's impossible for all your needs to be met.
yeah.
But my parents did a great job. I always had enough. I always had plenty. I should say plenty of food, plenty of clothes. Like, we didn't have like a ton of extra, but like I got to go to gymnastics and like things that like now paying for my kids' stuff. I'm like, how the hell did they afford that? Like, they did a lot. And I still think that my mom couldn't be what I needed, even though she tried her damnedest. But she was a great mom. She was a great mom. And like seeing my own kids, how different the two of them are, and being like, they have the most different personalities. Like, how did I make both of these humans? Like, they have such different needs. And I know that they're going to be adults and be like, I know I can't meet all of their human needs, and I think that's typical for everyone. But I am glad at least that I have something to make me a little better.
Yeah.
But also I want to say I'm proud of you, because I know for you, especially knowing you so well, that calling probably was hard. And I'm so grateful that you called me. So thank you for like letting me like be a person that could be there for you in the moment. And I'm also really proud of you for going to see Kayla. And I praised her ass up and down like for a long time, and I'm so glad that you met with her, and I'm glad that I'm glad that you took that step to feel better. I'm really, really proud of you.
Okay, out of here now. So what about those quotes we got going?
Yeah, well, let's end us on a quote. Let me find the one that we both agreed on here, because we had about 1 million of them. I do want to say, like, along with that I think one fear that a lot of people have is that when they're feeling so bad or like they don't want to be alive, that if they call anybody at all, that they would be a burden to them. And having gotten that call, like I told my kid's dad immediately, like, thank you. I'm honored that you called me. I am so grateful that he called. I'm so grateful. Like, I know you weren't like in the same moment, but I'm great. It means the world to me that like you trusted me with that, like with like to be there and for what you were going through, and you've been that person for me 100%. But I just like want people to know that never, when you feel in that moment, will you be a burden to somebody. Somebody on the other end is going to be so grateful that you called them, and that they could be there for you. So I wanted to say that. So this is a quote by John Green, and it says, "There is hope, even when your brain tells you there isn't."
That's it. That's all.
That's it. So thank you to everybody for listening. Take good care of yourselves.
Yep. Yeah.